If somebody were to create a conditioning class on pole and it was the same curriculum every single class and it was available to anybody who wanted to do it, I think, and then you just teach that same class 10 times a day, I think that will be whoever builds that business is going to be the first person to really commercialize a pole studio.
Hey everyone, this is your host Priya from Fitness Founders Podcast, and today I'm excited to have Amy Bond as our guest. Amy is the founder and CEO of Pole and Dance Studios in San Francisco, Oak, Berkeley, and Portland. She teaches workshops, pop-ups, and intensives at all 4 studios. She's also a professional division competitive pole dancer, a pro bono attorney, and an author. Her work has been published in Narratively, HuffPost, The Rumpus, and The Cut. Amy, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you with us.
Amy, thank you so much for joining the show. I'd love to start with you telling our listeners more about yourself. Where you grew up, what you studied.
Just about me generally.
Generally, yes.
Well, I was born to a military family, so I grew up all over the world. I was born in England. My mom was stationed in Germany when I was a baby, so I lived internationally during my early years. Um, yeah, lived all over the world with my family, and then I moved to Germany again when I was 17 to be an exchange student. And after that, moved back. Kind of like vagabonded around Europe for a couple of years. So I lived in France and I was an au pair in Paris. And I taught English in Italy for a while. And then finally, around 21, I went back home and
Mm-hmm.
started college. I spent a good 7 years in undergrad trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, eventually
Okay.
transferring to UC Berkeley. After that, I went to law school in Boston and then got married to my then husband, now ex husband. And he and I moved to California together in 2013, kind of to chase the tech, like the tech wave. It was just like, champagne season in San Francisco in 2013. And we both worked in tech for a while. And after he had a big exit from a tech company he was working at, I was able to start my own pole dance studio in 2016, and I've been doing that ever since.
That sounds great. And I have to tell you this. So when you mentioned about your, I think mom was in the military. Is she retired right
Yeah.
now, or is she still serving?
She's in the reserves. Yes. Yeah.
Got it. Because
Actually.
my dad was in military and he's retired right now. So when you spoke of traveling almost like
Mhm.
everywhere, all across the world, I could relate with that. And it's so different because you have to change your schools, you have to, make
Yeah.
friends with new people. It's not easy, but at the same time, it's so much fun. So I could
Yeah.
totally relate. The moment you mentioned about, being a military kid, that's like
Yeah.
we call ourselves. That's like a pride thing. I mean, I don't know how you take it, but lovely to know that. And I think the transition sounds great. You mentioned of the times you studied law and then you worked in tech for some time, and then
Mhm.
pole dance happened, right? So we'll talk more about it. But when it comes to performance art, very few people make a business out of it, right? Like I love dancing, for example, as a
Oh,
hobby.
that's hard.
I have That's hard. And I have friends, who wanted to learn, let's say,
Hmm.
contemporary style. They wanted to get a certification, start, teaching students. But then what happens? They just get stuck with this 9 to 5. They don't really, make a business out of it. And then there's you who's done it, right? So how did that transition happen from, studying law to, having your successful pole and dance studio?
How did the transition happen from
Yeah.
going from working in tech? Well, I
Mm-hmm.
graduated from law school. I am still an attorney, so I still do attorney work.
Okay.
Um, Very part time. Most of it is pro
Mm-hmm.
bono, though some of it is for other people who have started startups and pole dance studios and fitness studios and things like that. So it's not like I left the law completely. I still spend a good amount of time doing legal work each week. Um, but mainly because I actually love being a lawyer. I love working with people and helping them figure out all of their compliance things through legal work. But the transition was really, I graduated from law school with $200,000 in student loan debt. So I didn't really have the financial ability to quit my job or to not get a job. Like I had to get a job because my student loan repayment amount was almost as much as my rent in San Francisco at the time. Um, and you work at Bookie, so you work at a startup. You got it. Like working at a startup, you're not making the market rate you could be making when you are working in more established companies in the private sector. So I was working not too much under market, but I was probably making about 60% of what I could have been making if I had worked at
Right.
like a bigger company or gone into a law firm. But
Mm-hmm.
instead, I was always the ninth hire at different tech startups, and I worked at
Mm-hmm.
four different tech startups over the 5 years that I worked in tech. And it was usually after a Series A round. And so they had funding and could afford somebody who wasn't an engineer.
Right.
And so I just kind of rinsed and repeated multiple times. You know, I was the first of like many people hired in the Series A round. And so I developed the HR, the hiring, funnels, the pipelines, things like that, contracts, all of like the compliance side, and contract side and legal side and operations side of these companies. And at the same time, I was teaching pole dancing in the evenings at a studio that was in the city called Studio Botan. And um, and the owners of that studio approached me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in buying our business?" And I looked at their financials, and very similarly to most pole dance studios and most fitness studios, they were making like $0. I think they had literally made like $2 the previous year. And I said, I can't afford to run a business for free. I have all these student loans. Um, and so then I just kept teaching there and kept working in tech for a while. And then when a startup that my then husband, was working at got
Mm-hmm.
acquired, we got something like a windfall. Like it was a small windfall, but we got a small windfall that allowed me to pay off my student loans. So suddenly I didn't have like $5,000 a month payment on my student loans to make. And that allowed me to kind of go, okay, what do I want to, if I could do anything, what do I want to do? And I really did want to um, I did really want to open a pole dance studio. So I took over Studio Botan, turned it into San Francisco Pole and Dance. So we did a big rebrand. I hired all my friends who are also great pole dancers. And and then we were off to the races. Um, so that's how that transition happened. It was quite actually useful to grow other people's businesses and run operations in tech startups because all of those skills were the same skills that I need to run small businesses. And startups and small businesses are quite similar, with the exception that startups have a lot more money.
For sure. And some or the other way you were already doing it right there. Like it's like you were working as part of the core team. You were setting up the
Yeah.
processes, ops, like you mentioned. And Amy, thanks so much for sharing that. One question out of curiosity would be, like for example, I started loving, and of course, see, normal dance and pole dance are two different things. It's easier said than even imagine. Doing it, it's very difficult. But I'm just setting the
Both are hard.
context that when it's definitely. And then I got into dancing because I would see my siblings, and then that's how I developed the passion for, dancing. And of course, I'm not a professional, but the love for it. So how did
Yeah.
that come? Were you always like into, dancing, and then how did it moved to like pole dancing, for example?
Yeah, well, I was always an athlete, so I was a competitive swimmer growing up. I did varsity swimming, I did junior varsity synchronized swimming. I played every sport, but swimming was the one that I woke up every morning before school to swim. I think I swam for probably 20 hours a week for most of my childhood and my teenage years, and and then after I graduated from college, I got really into running. So I was really into running. And then when me and my ex husband moved to Boston, um, somebody said, "Oh, you should find a hobby that's inside because Boston gets really cold." And so I looked for like dance classes, and I found a pole dance studio, and I tried it and I loved it. I just fell in love with pole dancing from the moment that I touched a pole. It was like I was like touching my future. Like
Right,
I just
right.
fell in
Sounds
love
lovely. Yeah,
immediately. And
yeah.
and then I got really good. And then I started competing in pole dance competitions, and I started teaching, and I
Hmm.
started um, doing more competitions. Um, and so I think it was obvious that if anybody was going to like be the one to take the baton,
Hmm.
um, that I made sense because I also have a legal background and an operations background.
Right, right. And Amy, talk to me about your, initial days of starting your studio, the challenges, the setup. Of course, you did mention that, some or the other way you had the idea, and that sounds great. But,
Yeah.
having your own studio business as an entrepreneur, starting up, those initial hiccups, anything that you want to share with me?
Yeah, I think that in the early days of starting a business, and I also consult startup owners and small business owners, so I still see this a lot in other people, but it's like, right before you open, it's so exciting, and you're like, buying things and hiring people, and it's just like it's scary, but it's really exciting, and there's just a lot of enthusiasm. And also in San Francisco at the time, there really wasn't a pole dance studio that was well operated. So a lot, and wasn't any studios that had like more advanced classes. So me and other people who are very advanced would go to LA to train
Mm-hmm.
with coaches down there, and we'd go to a wonderful studio in Pleasanton called Twirly Girls, which is like 45 minutes away. And
Okay.
so I think there was just so much enthusiasm for um, what we were starting. And then you get into like the actual operations. And, I had hired my friends. And then suddenly, my, if your friend doesn't show up to teach on it because they've mixed up their schedule, then it becomes like a professional relationship really quickly. And I think that's one thing that is hard for most people who run small businesses is, a lot of small businesses are people with their family. That's even harder. My small business originally had been me and my friends. And it's hard to be the boss of your friends and like lay professional boundaries down. And it's hard to say, hey, you were 10 minutes late to teach. Like, I need to write you up and things like that. So, um, like those kind of things I think are hard, and can often leave the person who's like dedicating their whole life to building the community spaces for things like pole dancing or other fitness things, like make you feel a little bit like outside of the community that you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
build. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's one thing that's just hard about running a small business generally. My guess is
Yeah.
that's also true in startups. Every startup I worked with, the founders had been friends before they started a business together. So I think that's just hard. And the other reality is, and I consult a lot of people who are interested in starting a studio. And one thing I hear a lot is, oh, I really don't like my job. So I'm excited to start this studio so that I can quit my job. And that always seems like a big red flag to me, because the reality of small businesses, especially of creative businesses, is that it's really hard to make a margin. And it's especially hard to make a margin in like the first 3 years of operation. Like, I have 4 studios. Our most recent one, Portland Pole and Dance, we opened at the end of 2021. And the first year we lost a lot of money. The second year we lost still quite a bit of money, but less money than we lost the first year.
Right.
This year we probably won't break even, but we're
Mm.
very close to like not being in the red anymore. But that's 3 years into building this business that we're finally
Yep.
like, okay, I think we're finally going to make a profit next year. We hope, we think so. And
I
so
hope so too.
it's a lot of free labor to get to that
Mm.
break even point. And
Yeah.
again, I had a really fortunate and lucky situation where I didn't have to earn money from my businesses for the first while of running them because I had a partner who was making enough money to support both of us. And I think like that's kind of that I think those conditions set people up more for better success. Like the financial health of your personal finances you have to really take a deep look at that before and you have to be prepared to lose money. Like you are going to lose money from the beginning, in the beginning, almost always. San Francisco pole and dance was a little different. We never actually lost money in from the day we opened. We made a little bit of profit, um, and and now actually we're seeing a lot more competition in our neighborhood. So it is a little bit harder now than it even was like, in year two, year three, when we were the only pole dance studio on the block. But at the end of the day, I also think competition makes everybody better. So,
Yeah.
you know, they're just different situations, but like be
Mm,
prepared to lose money before you make money and also be
right.
prepared to not be able to quit your job in order to run the business.
No, for
Yeah.
sure. I think that's a great point because when you mentioned, I was gonna ask you, that was my next question, that how do you manage with the initial funds, right? And just now you said that you had your partner. Of course, you had your tech job as well, so you were able to manage, but not everybody may not have that, and they might just want to do it because maybe it's just fancy, and I want to quit my job. I'm just frustrated. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's definitely a key takeaway for studio owners, at least who are starting up, who would be
Mhm.
listening to our conversation, right? And you spoke of having your four studios, which is great. So at what point did you decide to expand to a new location, like that first location? Like what was that deciding point or factor?
Yeah. So, in 2018, 2 years after I opened San Francisco Pole and Dance, me and my then studio manager, Joshua Sierfredone, we decided to start looking at spaces in Oakland, which is across the bridge from San Francisco in the Bay Area in San Francisco, in the Bay Area of California. And the reason that we started looking at Oakland was partially because we asked our students, like, where are you coming from? Where do you live? And we found that 30% of our students were coming to San Francisco from Oakland to take classes. So 30%, that's a big percentage. And we also knew that there was only one other pole studio in Oakland at the time. And I talked to one student in particular who told us, we had interviewed a bunch of students who lived in Oakland about where they would want to see a studio open up. And many said the Lake Merritt area. And she told us that she actually had to give her dog medicine. So, even though she worked in San Francisco, she had to go home and feed her dog medicine at 5 p.m. So she'd leave her job at 4 p.m., get
Right.
home to feed her dog at 5, and then take Bart, the train, back to San Francisco just to take class with us and then
Oh
go
my
home. So
God.
she actually crossed the bridge 2 times just to take class.
Mm,
So we knew that our students were really dedicated, and we knew that there was a large population of people who were coming to San Francisco from Oakland, and that we could capture a much larger percentage of the pole dancing population in Oakland if we had a studio there. So we knew that we had a market.
right. And it's like asking your potential customers, right? And those were already your customers, the people you were asking, they were already traveling, right? So getting that
Yeah.
30 percentage, I think we call it in technical terms, all these customer surveys, right? We ask them, what would work for you,
Yeah.
and that's how, and it
Yeah.
adds value to your customer retention as well. You just serve them better and they keep coming back to you. So that's a great strategy. And I want to kind of move away from the business aspect, Amy, a little bit, and I want to ask you, as an entrepreneur, how does your day look like? How do you unwind? What do you do when you're not working?
Well, as an entrepreneur, I am always working. I am, in fact, a workaholic, and I don't see that as a problem. I know a lot of people who are workaholics feel like that's an issue to be solved. And for me, it's really not. I love pole dancing, I love what I do. And I have a really great team who I work with. So that's the add on that is an important add on. Because I have had teams where I did not enjoy working with them. And when that is the case, my enthusiasm for my businesses really like goes down the drain. So I would say, the thing that makes the work so joyful, even now, almost 9 years into running this business, is or collection of businesses, is that I have an amazing team. And, from the moment I get onto email, I know that they trust me and I trust them. And we're also in a really cool position where like everybody I'm working with is a domain expert. So they know more about their jobs than I do. I don't know nearly as much about social media as my social media manager, Kyla, does. I
And
don't know
that's how it's
nearly
supposed
as
to be. Yeah.
right, totally. So
Yeah.
it really feels like, a team effort. So yeah, I'm always thinking about my studios. I wish I could turn my brain off sometimes, but I really don't. Um, but I also I have the flexible schedule that I think a lot of people imagine having when they dream about entrepreneurship, but it took a long time to get here. Again, I'm almost 9 years into building this business. It wasn't until around year 7 where I wasn't always needing to be watching. Um, and so I do have a good amount of free time. Most of it is spent in the studio training I'm competing in a pole competition this weekend up in Seattle. So I've been training for that competition. Um, I take a lot of the classes that other instructors teach across the studios. Most of my friends are pole dancers. So when I go out with friends, it's with them. I spend time with my boyfriends, and I have a rich, you know, life part of the work life balance as well.
Hmm. That's lovely. My favorite part was when you mentioned that combination. As long as you love what you do, and you
Hmm.
like the people you're doing that with, your people you're working with. I think if that combination fits well, then you just gonna,
Yeah,
then there's no complaint about all this. Oh my God, I don't have a work-life balance. It's just like,
yeah,
and there's this new term called work-life integration, right? It's okay. I may take,
mm,
few hours off from my day, but then I might log in back again. I'm saying log in my case, but maybe
yeah,
you could go back to your studio and do your thing. So that's just how it is, and that's like a on point answer. So thanks so much, Amy, for that.
yeah.
I do want to ask you, what's been your favorite memory from the journey so far, like maybe first paycheck, favorite client story, anything that you want to share.
Oh man, there's so many good ones, but the ones that stick out are like where things really fall apart, um, I think one of the best things about running a business that is more a community than it is like a business. Like, yes, pole and dance is a business, but it's also like a deeply integrated community of people I want to spend time with. Um, and so, you know, I wish everybody had this in their work, but I swear every single day, whether it's through an Instagram DM or somebody coming up to me in person or somebody I talk to, I I receive at least one person telling me, "Thank you so much for this space. Thank you for the work you do every day. Thank you for creating this community of people." And of course, I didn't do it alone, and that's the other thing about entrepreneurship. When things go wrong, you get all the blame, but when things go well, you get all the credit. And it's not just me; it's my entire team who does this work. But it's really nice to have work where other people see like what you've invested in it and are like constantly saying thank you for it, that
Yeah.
feels really nice. um and and that's a reality of running these pole studios as well.
Yeah, yeah, which are community-driven businesses, right? And that's like you're
Hmm.
meeting the purpose. If people are happy and if they're saying that thank you for doing this, I'm happy to be here. If they like the vibe, if they're connecting or engaging with like-minded folks, then
Yeah,
that's that.
I think another
Um,
thing I love is just watching how students create their own micro communities as well. Like,
mm,
um, I, we had at San Francisco, our first studio, we had 6 students who would meet. They had studio access membership, so they came in to train together, and they would coordinate training together every Friday, and they would put together routines together. And it was so sweet to see these like videos that they made just meeting each other on their spare time, practicing what they learned in class. And at our Oakland studio, there are a bunch, every one of our studios has some of those where students like, my closest friends are people I met through pole dancing. My best friend I met, we did pole competitions together for many years. And I love seeing those friendships being formed in the spaces that I built. It feels really magical, and like like this is the change that I want to create in the world.
Right, for sure. There's also that saying that, sometimes you meet the best people at your workplace. You never know, right? So that
Yeah,
happened for you, and really glad to know that. Let's move a little bit towards the business side now, Amy. So how do you
sure.
attract and convert clients? Like, what do you do for marketing and sales?
That's a really good question. I think actually retention is something that we're thinking about more um, this year, that or we're starting to think about more right now. Um, we haven't done a ton of work around retention. I recently talked to, um, I also have a podcast called Up the Pole Podcast, where I talk to other pole dance studio owners about how they run their studios. And there are two women in Atlanta, Georgia, and their business is called, they have pole studios, but they also have a marketing business. Their
Mhm.
business is called the Marketing Babes. Every
Oh, are
time,
you are you are you speaking of Angela and Erin?
yes, exactly.
Oh, of course. I do
Yes.
interact with them almost like on a regular basis. They're
Oh,
they're
cool.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, they are amazing. And I asked them the same question, what do you do? They have a spreadsheet where their front desk managers talk to every single person who walks through their door at least 5 times to say, hey, do you have any questions about our pricing? Hey, did you know we have this deal going? Hey, da da da. So that's some like best practice black belt style marketing. I know that our business would have higher retention if we did that kind of work. And to be honest, it's mainly been word of mouth. And we have some emails set up, automated emails set up in Bookie. Um, and there is like a funnel people follow for like new students, but we're not doing nearly enough of that work. And it's only been this year when the number of new students coming into the studio is lower than it was the previous year that we're going, oh shoot, we should probably start doing this. So I wouldn't say that I'm doing it the way that you are like by the book gold standard should be doing
Mhm.
it, but I know that Angela and her partner are.
Definitely. And Amy, if I may ask, what could be the reason of, you did mention that we want to do it, but we haven't been able to do it. And what could be the reason? Is it, I don't know, like just trying to understand.
Yeah, that is a good question. I think between me, Iris, my creative director, and Jenna Lux, my operations manager, we just did a big reorg this year. So now we're operating in the studio manager world, and we have worked our way through some big projects lately. Um, it will become the focus after these big projects are like completed. And it's just been at the bottom of the list. I think it's also just when I think about calling people or texting people, I also worry about, feeling like I'm bothering people. So I worry that like it's too salesy, it's too markety.
Hmm.
But in talking to Angela and her partner, one thing that they said is like people want this information. You're educating people. And I think I
Right.
just need to reframe it through my brain in that way. Like this is education and people can unsubscribe or say stop if they want to.
Exactly, exactly. It's not saying that, here's my offer and here's the discount code that you want to use. It could be just a video that's talking about, an upcoming, workshop, or it could be just four pointers which are breaking myths about, let's say, just pole dancing. And that came from Angela. So I was just talking to her, and she was
Oh,
like,
cool.
sometimes people ask us that, do you guys operate out of a garage? It's as simple as that, right? So breaking this kind of myths, having some educational content going on, right? So I do get what she's trying to say, and that does work. So like nurturing people, and if they get convinced by themselves, you're not even pushy, right? They're coming to you.
Yeah.
So that kind of sales tactic definitely works. And do want to talk about metrics, Amy, as well. What metrics do you measure for all this marketing, sales, and retention? Of course, you haven't started, but at least for the marketing and sales, what numbers do you look at and be like, I want to have these numbers no matter what?
Yeah. Well, number one is one metric that we look at every month. We do a report. We run a report on number of students per class, and if that class has more than 6 people, okay, that's doing well. If it has less than 6 people, okay, why does it have less than five? Why does it have less than 6 people? Do we need to change the instructor? Do we need to put a different class here? Which classes are going well? And we have leveled classes, foundations, level 2, level 3, level 4. We also have a heels program. Choreo and Heels Foundation is true beginner, and then beginner heels, and then intermediate advanced. And we look at the numbers, the average number of people per class type, and go, okay, do we need more level 2 classes because the influx of January students are now moving up? Do we need more
Mm,
foundations classes to prepare for January? Again, pole is quite cyclical, just like most of fitness. So
mhm,
January is New Year's resolution season. That wave gets ridden through March. September, October, also busy months. November, December, slower months. So how do we adjust our schedule in advance so that we don't see those low numbers in classes after the fact that we're getting ready for them? Um, Other numbers we look at obviously are, gross profit, net profit, margin. Where do we need to cut spending? Where are we spending too much? Again, that's almost always directly correlated to um, which classes are underperforming. Usually, you cut the underperforming class and then you increase the margin. So our two biggest expenses are rent, but that's not even the biggest expense. Our biggest expense is employees, and I think that's how it should be. But also making sure that the classes that you're paying for, you're net revving, or that you have the classes with the highest attendance in the most lucrative spots.
right.
Um, Beyond that, new students, number of new students who walk through the door, what is our retention rate? Um,
Yeah.
in pole, retention tends to be lower than other forms of fitness, partially
Okay.
because we have so many different types of classes. Like if you go to a Pilates class, you can kind of sign up for the same class at 6 a.m., 7:10 a.m., noon, 5 p.m., 7 p.m. With a pole studio, especially if you only have one room, you can only you we only have 3 foundations classes a week. We only have 4 inversions conditionings per studio per at a week. So it's harder for people to match their schedules because there's just so many different class types, and the class types are limited to ability. Um, I think that there's a big opportunity for somebody, and it won't be me because I'm not that interested in this business model, but I could see it being really valuable if somebody were to create a conditioning class on pole, and it was the same curriculum every single class, and it was available to anybody who wanted to do it. I think, and then you just teach that same class 10 times a day. I think that will be whoever builds that business is going to be the first person to really commercialize a pole studio.
Wonderful. You just gave out a business idea just like that. But
Yeah,
it makes
take it.
sense though, because you said
Mhm.
schedules and your the lineup doesn't match of the classes, right? And that's why people, even if they show up, they may not stick around, and
Yeah.
that becomes a retention problem, right?
Mhm.
What I also loved is setting those benchmarks, like keeping a track of the classes, like have they reduced, what did they reduce? So being prepared, like there's this yoga coach called like Michael J. We also work with fitness industry, leaders, experts. So he also mentioned that you can't just be like, oh, my Halloween is coming, so let's do something about it. Like if 2025 is coming, you need to prepare like at least 3 months in advance, look at your numbers,
Totally.
and come up with a plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We've been much better about that this year, but it's hard to get ready in advance. It really is. It's hard to remember, like, oh, in 3 months, Halloween is coming because 3 months before Halloween, you're in July. You're like, that's years away, but it comes like that, you know?
Exactly, for
Yeah.
sure. And Amy, you did mention of, Instagram DMs when it came to speaking of to your customers, but generally, where do you talk to your customers the most? Like, is it texting, emails? Like, what channel works for you?
In person. And me personally, in person. I taught
Okay, okay.
I teach almost every day. I teach at all of the studios, and my and teaching is often an excuse to talk to students. How are things going? How do you like this class? What do you think about this new curriculum we're offering? What do you think about this new pricing structure we're doing? And I mainly talk to people who are members and people who are new students. So I get the people who are very bought in and the people who aren't sure yet. And those are the two demographics or like buckets of students that I learn the most from.
Yeah. So keep talking to them, and in person is the best way for sure. And coming, I mean, going a little bit into the entrepreneurial direction, Amy, what are
Yeah.
some of the events that you never miss, or some communities you're a part of?
Communities that I'm a part of. Um, you mean outside of pole dancing?
It could be a part of pole dancing or outside, which kind of helps you, get all these, like business growth ideas or just networking with like-minded folks. It could be pole dancing, anything.
Yeah, my community is pole dancers. I'm mainly community of the studios that I've built. Um, Beyond that, you know, I go to pole camps every year. I go to at least one. So I get to, I went to Turkey this year to train with a pole dancer named Dmitry Politov, who's based in Turkey and Russia. Yeah, obviously, we're not going to Russia right now, but in Turkey, I was able to train with him in Antalya, and there were people from all over the world at this camp. So it was an advanced level camp, but it is also nice, to go to a place where I'm not in charge. It's nice to go to a place where, like, I'm just one of the girls, and I get to be a student, and I get to be taken care of the way that I take care of my students and our communities every day. And I get to meet pole dancers. I met somebody from Canada. I met somebody from Washington. I met multiple people from France. I met people from all over the world.
Mm,
And so that's a really nice way um, to meet more of the community. I also guest teach all over the country. So when I go to
hmm.
guest teach, say in Florida, I get to meet other studios communities and I get to see how those studios run their operations, which also
Right.
I'm able to go, oh, I love that, there's a studio in New York City in Brooklyn
Mm,
called Incredible, and they
okay.
have this waiting room that has like a free book exchange. That's such a cool idea, and it really
Mm,
like funnels into community. Like this is a community space where now we're sharing our
mm,
books with each other. So
mm.
we added a little bookshelf with like bring books and like book trade here at San Francisco Pole and Dance. So it's like things like that, like little like nuggets of like, oh, that's operationally really smart. Let's try that. And when I guest teach other
Right.
places, I can really not only meet students but see like innovative things other businesses are doing.
That wraps up our conversation today. Thanks so much, Amy, for sharing your journey with us. If you found this episode valuable, do follow us and subscribe for more expert tips on how to grow your fitness business. You can also connect with Amy through links in the description and podcast notes. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.